in student days, we got stuck on a verse when handling a word which actually comes up in this text, taken up by St. Matthew, but coming from Isaiah. Those who sat in the region and shadow of death, we were rather like the young Saul at the feet of Gamaliel, because our prof was the one who had been partly responsible for translating the Old Testament into modern Welsh, William Jones, and he said, what does this word mean? Shalamaweth. Does it mean deep darkness, or are the two roots there, shadow and death? The root of Maweth is linked with Mo's death. Definitely it's there, but it could just mean figuratively, because Hebrews just put things in maximum form by adding another word. So death is a big word. Maximum, a dark place. It comes in Psalm 22, the valley of the shadow of death, which has been always used at funerals from when it was composed. And therefore, at that point, we are at the frontier of light and darkness. One is but to think of that in this place so close to New Grange. Death. Just the other day we had the solstice and the eventual phenomenon of the light coming through the shaft and hitting that place where they hoped that the ashes would receive force from the reborn sun. Death and shadow. In fact, remember when studying the sapiential works that it was clear that actually they didn't have a glorious hope. When they were dying, they were going into a region of shadowiness. I remember the teacher, he was a good priest down in Dublin, saying in that lecture how these souls would say to each other, welcome to the land of the shades. And so there they were, where they were going. Well, even Adam was down there somewhere, because precisely that's what we have in the iconography of Holy Saturday. Come, thou that sleepest. That has been taken up by the centuries. Light, let Christ shine on you. So precisely at Epiphany we think of what it means really to have hope and not to be going into the land of shades. I remember when I was staying down for when I was 17, a good monk was looking after me, Don Gregory, drew a cross. He was teaching me a bit of Greek at the time, and he had these two words, what is grace? And I was answering him in good evangelical terms, it's a gift that we receive that we don't deserve the least little bit. Can you be more precise? And then he went on, so it was obviously a quality of the soul. Grace is a quality of the soul, and it's the light of life. And he drew this image of a cross with two intersecting words with one common letter in the middle, omega. Zoe, light, and phos, life. And that is what we have. I remember actually in one sermon that one of the priests preached there in our Benedictine church in Cardiff, he challenged us, what is grace? He said, we know how to obtain it, but how do we define it? He got us to think. We feel, however, its effects and the absence of it. A soul that sins gravely feels a certain ouch deep down which it can't avoid. Mortal sin takes it away and it sort of knows it without being able to put its finger on it. The conscience hurts. And the soul, coming from the cleansing of the sacrament of reconciliation, feels a complete rebirth in light. It even affects the body, because a person who is in good state interiorly is well able to fight certain diseases more than a person who's already gloomy and shady inside. We have an upbeat which helps even medicine. And perhaps this increase in cancer over the world is linked with stress and lack of grace also. Well, St. John is the doctor of grace. Charis ante charitos, grace upon grace, or grace in return for grace. as though when we said yes to grace, we merit more grace, and when we deflect it, we block it again. A vicious circle, or a positive progress. But he goes into some detail. Much of his work is about the battle between light and darkness. It's there in the prologue, it's there at the end of his gospel. The light itself is eclipsed. Well, here we have this teaching about also the link between light and truth, and those who are precisely going to know the truth because they're in light and able to face the light. It's rather as when one cleans a room. If one is lazy, one does it without the light on. If one has bright light or light coming from the window, from the sun, one sees all the little mites and moths and things that might be in the air, dusty things which one doesn't see very well when there's not much light. It's the same before the light of grace. We start to see things in our soul. It's rather like the difference between a nurse and a bricklayer. The nurse is always washing her hands in high-powered detergent. The bricklayer couldn't care less about one more cloud of mud. The soul needs to be taken care of there and being exposed to divine grace, which is why we have the system in the Catholic Church of making sure that's the case. Before going to sleep, one has examination of conscience, and before confession, one does the same, which should be the sum of the examinations of conscience in the week, and retreats, monthly or otherwise, so we have that exposure to the one who's going to judge us, the keen vision of the Alpha and the Omega. I remember reading that from Father Stephen Shire, who died and then came back to life, miraculously really, but he was saying before the Supreme Judge, before the truth, all one can say is yes, 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 because he was guilty, but he was given a second chance by Our Blessed Lady. But it was the question of grace, and he mentioned also that it was with regard to the abuse of grace, because if we went to confession often but not appropriately, it wasn't doing good to the soul. The abuse of grace leads to the withdrawal of grace. So he goes on specifically, remembering that he's writing here in the context of already incipient Gnosticism. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit which confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God. The spirit which does not confess Jesus is not of God. So that's already counteracting what's coming in. Now, the spirit of Antichrist is therefore one which was linked with its author. This is the spirit of Antichrist, of which you heard that it was coming, and now it is in the world already. Little children, you are of God and have overcome them, for he who is in you, grace, in habitation of the Blessed Trinity, is greater than he who is in the world. They are of the world, echoing the prayer of the Lord in the same Gospel, that is the same writer, St. John's Gospel, chapter 17. The Lord is praying precisely not that he be taken out of the world, but he is making a distinction between the world and his followers. They are of the world, therefore what they say is of the world. That sounds very familiar in our time. And the world listens to them. That's even more familiar. We are God. Whoever knows God listens to us. That's our reaction as preachers and writers. If there's a bad reaction, it's a reaction to the light. It's a kind of reaction, litmus test. Light has easy access to the soul open, but is deflected by the one who has a problem. And the problem is the problem, not the actual truth they're trying to handle, because they can't face it. So one doesn't get into an argument, one sees the problem. And by the way, there's an echo in that in what's going on in the States right now. People are nervous before even actually hard facts, so they become noisy. Noise is a form of darkness, because hell, a dark place, is full of noise. It has the advantage of making us deaf to light and truth. And who is not of God does not listen to us. By this we know the spirit of truth the spirit of error. Our Lord himself says that the devil is a liar from the beginning, the father of it, the father of lies. So any collusion with the devil is also usually untruthful. We shouldn't meddle with lies. And by the way, that enters also into theology. Newman eventually couldn't anymore remain in the intellectual battle of handling theology as a game. It became a question of salvation. Light stands before me. Can I remain where I am and be saved?